You're watching KHOU 11 Plus. I'm Marcelino Benito. It's Alzheimer's Awareness Month, and today we'll be spending the next 45 minutes talking about hope, help, and healing when it comes to this disease. Now, according to the Alzheimer's Association, nearly 7 million Americans are living with Alzheimer's. In fact, they say the disease kills more people than breast and prostate cancer combined. Now, many of you know me as the anchor and reporter you see on the news most nights, but I'm also a son who lost his mother to Alzheimer's on April 10th, 2023. Since that day, it's become a mission of mine to help raise awareness about this disease and the fight to end it. Unfortunately, it's a disease destroying families across our community.
Tears, I don't think, truly ever stop.
Outside Marina Castillo's Crosby home, the color purple reminds her of all she lost years ago and what she's still fighting for today.
She was like second mom to you.
Yes, absolutely.
Her grandmother, Lupita Gil, was diagnosed with Alzheimer's in 1997. She witnessed her slow decline as her caregiver up close, confusion and memory loss, until the day she no longer recognized her.
Even though she doesn't realize that that little girl is in front of her, she knows, and the love that we had never truly went away.
Lupita passed away in 2009, 12 years after her diagnosis.
Losing such a big person in my life was very difficult. When it finally happens, you kind of just let it all out.
Latino families like Marina's and mine are just 2 of millions touched by Alzheimer's. It's why at the University of Houston, researchers like Dr. Luis Medina are tackling what they call a public health crisis. And right now, there is no cure.
By the year 2060, we're expecting about a 9-fold increase in Hispanic individuals with Alzheimer's disease.
That's more than any other group. In Houston, home to 44% Hispanics, that will pose severe challenges for thousands of families.
The impact of this disease ends up really extending well beyond just the individual.
The problem is truly troubling in the Rio Grande Valley. It sees some of the highest Alzheimer rates in the country. It's 90% Hispanic. People 65 and up there, nearly twice as likely to be diagnosed with the disease compared to the national average.
The estimates that we do have may not be the full picture.
Finding out why Hispanics have a higher chance of Alzheimer's is critical to finding a cure. But despite accounting for 18% of the population, only 2% of Alzheimer's trial participants are Latinos.
We need to see how the disease acts out in all different types of brains.
At Baylor College of Medicine, Dr. Nora Vanegas Arroyave is working to recruit more Latinos for their ongoing Alzheimer's studies.
This is something we're going to have to face at some point.
There's still much to learn about the disease and Latinos, but what's clear so far, language, cultural barriers, and access to care are all pieces of the problem.
There may be a lot of taboos about participation in research and fear.
That fear kept people like my mom from participating. Other Latino families overlook memory loss, wasting critical time without seeing a doctor for diagnosis.
When we see the signs, we need to speak up about them. Not just brush them off because grandma or grandpa is getting old.
It is a painful journey to have to travel, but ask anyone who's lived it, and they'll tell you the disease takes its toll, but cannot destroy everything.
Right. They don't forget love. They know that you are somebody important to them. They know that you're their family. And I think that love is always there.
My mom certainly didn't forget that love, and I miss her every single day. Now, to continue this important conversation, I'm now joined by Dr. Paul Scholes, a neurologist at UT Health Houston and director of the Memory Disorders and Dementia Clinic at McGovern Medical School, Anne Marie McDonald, the chief programs officer at the local chapter of the Alzheimer's Association right here in Houston, Lance McNeil, who is currently living with Alzheimer's, and his wonderful wife, Liz, who serves as his caregiver. Thank you so much to all of you for joining us this morning for such an important conversation. So as we mark Alzheimer's Awareness Month, let's start with this question for the group. What do you hope viewers take away from our conversation? And anyone can jump in at this point. Why don't we start with you, Dr. Schultz?
Come and see us early. We have new medicines we might talk about that are helping. Lance is getting one of them. But the key is that they work early. And so if you have any concerns about you or your loved one, come see your doctor early so we can evaluate you and decide if this kind of treatment is right for you.
Anne-Marie, what do you hope viewers take away from this?
That there's hope and that there's resources and services available in Houston and the Southeast Texas area for everybody. And we want to make sure that people understand that we're here for you.
And Liz and Lance?
I think one of the things that concerns me is we have a lot of people who are engaged in working with Alzheimer's, and there's a lot of people who just don't want to deal with it. And so we know of people who have chosen not to work with Leqembi or any of the other products that are out there.
Sure. And Liz?
I think that's it. What Dr. Schultz said, I certainly second that about early. It's important to do something as soon as you suspect something.
I know from personal experience, sometimes you bury your head in the sand when you're in the middle of it and it's hard to confront what you're facing. But to your point, Dr. Schultz, it's so important to get in early, especially now that there's progression in terms of treatments, which we'll get into in just a little bit. So as we mentioned off the top, Alzheimer's research is advancing all the time, but many people still have misconceptions about what causes it and how it actually progresses. So Dr. Schultz, can you explain how the disease works? What do we understand about Alzheimer's at this time?
We know there's a lot of risk factors. For any individual, it's sometimes hard to say exactly why they got it. There is some genetic component, then there's also things we don't understand yet. But we do know that all the cardiovascular risk factors are also risk factors for Alzheimer's, so controlling them is useful. The big steps in the disease we can definitely identify through modern diagnostic tools are people deposit amyloid plaques in the brain for up to 10 or 20 years before they come in with a symptom. Then they deposit something called tau protein, then they have inflammation. And I just mentioned that because we have diagnostic tools to identify each of those. We have studies going on trying to impact each of those steps to reduce the risk of progression. The two medications that are now approved work on item 1, amyloid plaques, and removing them from the brain.
And that gets to the next question in terms of treatment. For years, there really hasn't been treatment to at least slow the disease, right? It's been managing symptoms.
Yes.
But we've entered a new age in the fight against this disease.
It's a really great time. I have a lot of gray hair, so I've been in the field a while. It's a really great time to see people doing better than they have my whole career, my whole time dealing with the disease. Yeah, it's the amount of slowing of the progress of the disease varies by person, but it's anywhere from 25% slowing to 60% slowing, and some people even stay stable for a while.
And are those two medications we're talking about, or could you walk us through that?
Yes, there's two of them. They're very interesting. Some really smart immunologist came up with the idea, why don't we use people's own immune systems to get rid of plaques in the brain? They're microscopic. You can't go in there with surgery and take them out. And but it turns out we all, get our flu vaccine, our COVID vaccine, etc. Some guy got the idea, well, why don't we make antibodies not against the flu virus, but against amyloid plaques? And that's what these two drugs are. They're antibodies against the plaques. They attach to the plaques, and that turns on the immune system in the brain, and suddenly it starts eating away at the plaques, and literally by a year and a half, 70 or more % have no plaques that we can see on their PET scan. It's that effective, those drugs, at getting rid of plaques.
So it's offering people hope.
Exactly.
And Lance, you were saying you're actually on one of these medications, is that right?
Yeah.
And which one is that?
Leqembi.
Okay. And
it took me a while to figure out that name and everything.
yeah, it can be a little tricky. I'd like to get a little bit more about your experience, Lance and Liz, together as a couple. How were you diagnosed? It was a bit earlier than most folks with this disease, right? Could you walk us through your experience?
It was situations where I got lost when I shouldn't have and things like that. Liz got nervous about it and wanted to contact every operation in the world, trying to figure out what to do.
As any good wife would.
Yes. And she did a good job, and got me in with with the group I'm in.
What other signs did you notice, or what was it from your perspective?
I saw a lot of changes, just things changing that things that have been the same for 30 or 40 years, and all of a sudden they're different, and just some personality things and doing different things, and it's the changes. And I had been a volunteer community educator for the Alzheimer's Association before this all happened. And the thing we always talk about in there in the presentations is look for changes. And so that helped me realize that those changes were not right. It wasn't just aging as people think. And so we were able to talk about it and say we need to look for some help. And there's a stigma, we all know, with Alzheimer's, and people have issues and they don't want to think about it and they don't want to be near it or talk about it. And so we didn't want to be that way. You know, I said we know something's going on. The earlier we do something about it, the more you can be involved in the decision-making process for treatment. And so,
Lance, what have you learned about managing life with this disease? How has living with this disease changed your day-to-day?
It's not that bad. I go to my infusion twice a month. It's very easy to do. It's nobody wants to get stuck in the pan, but you know, once it's through, then it's through, and everything works okay. The first infusion that I had made me a little like I didn't know what was going on. I went to sleep for 4 hours or something like that. But when I woke up, everything was fine. I haven't had any problems since.
Liz, he said it hasn't been that bad. I saw you chuckle.
It is kind of funny because our whole life changed. There's no way that you can get around that.
Yeah.
The first thing that we did was treat it like any diagnosis, because as we age, we all know we're going to get something. Statistics prove that. Something's going to happen to us. And so we just addressed it head on, but we had to make changes. And so I still work, so I moved my office back home so I could be home, and then Lance wasn't working anymore, but now he works around the house constantly. He manages everything in the house, and he's a painter also. That was always something he's done, and so he paints just unbelievably daily. And so it's changed things, but not really. It's made things a little bit just different, you know, whereas I changed my days off so that I can take a day off during the week, and then we can go somewhere. We try to go different places, do different things. And every morning when we get up, my question is, what are we going to do today? Create new memories. And so we kind of lead that way. But it's definitely a change.
Well, you've seen the effects of this disease up close as a caregiver. We don't often think about the caregivers when we're talking about disease, although they're the central part. I mean, what would Alzheimer's patients do without their caregivers? I'm curious what some of the challenges that you faced as a caregiver, and take us into that experience of watching your loved one with this disease and being their primary caregiver.
The first thing was just finding a neurologist. We talked to Dr. Schultz about that. Just finding someone who is willing and open to treating this and not just saying, oh, it's just aging. And so that was a major, major obstacle, was finding someone. And then once we did, then it's managing everything. It's managing the appointments. It's taking the calls just to make sure. It's not that Lance can't do that himself, but I just need to make sure that I know what's going on. So it's being involved in every aspect of the treatment, and still, like I said, working and doing all the other things that I do. So that's been a challenge. And plus, you know, is happy, and we try to be happy about it. We try to make the best, but no matter how much you do that, there's still those moments when it's a fatal disease. We know that. So, you know, that kind of gets to you sometimes and you think about it, but we just try to move past it. But it is something that is in the back of our minds, both of us.
It's one of those diseases, and I speak from my personal experience, that really takes an emotional toll on the whole family unit, emotionally, psychologically. You know, things will likely get worse, and you're watching your loved one slowly fade over time. Thanks to medicines, we're slowing that down. But Anne, you work so closely with patients and their families. We talk a lot about the emotion and psychology of this disease. What support resources are available for folks who are facing this?
Well, I think Liz said it really well. I think education is really empowering because knowing certain things are going to happen. And so, even before somebody is diagnosed or before you have someone, in your family, just maybe learning about the 10 warning signs and kind of getting prepared for, the journey that could happen. But for a lot of caregivers, there is a lot of emotional baggage with this disease. And so we offer things like support groups. Well, I would say that if you're a caregiver who's starting the journey, the best place is either, if you're one of these people who like to DIY, you can go on the Alzheimer's website and go on to Alz Navigator and just kind of go through that, and it helps you to kind of create a plan. For me, I would say the best thing is to call the 800 number because you have care consultants who are able to actually walk you through. And sometimes there are questions that you have that you don't even know that you should be asking. And so that's it. But we know that it's a process of grief, because once you're diagnosed, we know that the disease is fatal and we're going to live our lives, but we're still going to have a lot of grief. And so support groups, I think, are really helpful for that because you can talk to people who are in the same position as you. You can process your grief that way. We also know that a lot of caregivers are going through stress. We have people who are still working, and you're going to have to balance care of yourself as well as care of the person you're living with. So, I would say to caregivers, think about ways in which you can manage your stress. It's not an easy place, and I think giving yourself grace, because a lot of caregivers get angry. I know I used to do the helpline. I used to actually do the helpline for our chapter, and we would have a lot of calls with people who had planned their retirement and had planned their lives, and they were going to do all these things, and now they have to change. And they are angry, and they're angry at themselves for being angry. And so, being able to understand that this is a normal part of life in terms of yourself and being able to work through it, I think is important.
And Anne-Marie, you mentioned something that you must have been reading our viewers' minds, because they exactly asked the question that you were sort of addressing there. I want to go to you, Liz, though. If you could talk about sort of responding to what Anne-Marie said, how important those resources have been, and also add this, in my personal experience, I knew the Alzheimer's Association was there, but I didn't reach out. I buried my head in the sand. I tried to pretend it wasn't happening, tried to enjoy the brief good moments that we would have. Was it easy for you to always reach out, or talk about your experience in terms of accessing those resources that you would need as a caregiver to help Lance?
I think it was just because, again, I was involved with them, so I knew that a lot of the people there, and that wasn't quite so challenging. Knowing the resources that were there, that wasn't quite a challenge for me. But it's a big deal because you have to say, this is happening, so you have to accept it. And I think that takes people a little bit of time, is accepting this is happening. This is, like I said, any diagnosis, I have to accept this is happening, and what do I do about it? That takes a while, because it's it fills you with sorrow, and you grieve, and sometimes it's hard to even talk about those things. But I think reaching out, and the people that I've talked to in this world have been very helpful. The Alzheimer's Association is so helpful to people, and it's just taking that first step, though. It's hard for us in anything we do.
Lance, you were the one who was diagnosed. So what was that experience like for you in terms of accepting it, or the emotions that you went through learning that you had Alzheimer's?
I guess at first I didn't want to believe it. That was a short time because it was obviously there. One of the first thing that my physician told me was, you have to stop driving, and that was a big part of my life. So I got used to that. But other than that, I'm kind of mellow and stuff. So I don't really get real charged up over things. But there are times when I'm just you kind of like, here I go again.
I think one of the things that Lance has said is it's in retirement though. It's not so much just this, but in retirement. But then you add this on top of it. It's hard to feel relevant, and that's been a challenge.
Yeah.
And that's why Lance took this on and said, I'm going to tell everybody about this. I'm going to tell anyone who asks me. He will go up to give someone his credit card and have to tip, and he'll say, just a minute, I have Alzheimer's. So he's, has taken that on and said, and that has given him that feeling of relevance that he can maybe get one person to make a step early and make the call and seek help.
And it's really amazing how many people are touched and impacted by this disease across our community. The Alzheimer's Association was here yesterday at KHOU doing a presentation, and I'm pretty outspoken about my own story, but I didn't know how many people in this very building are touched and impacted by this disease. People opened up yesterday and shared their stories, which was pretty impactful for me. Dr. Scholes, I want to go over to you. We know Alzheimer's is a progressive disease, right? Things do get worse. But as you mentioned right off the top, early detection is critical, it's key. And Anne-Marie mentioned 10 warning signs. What are some of those early warning signs that medical professionals advise we should be on the lookout for in your loved ones?
Really good question. The challenge for loved ones is that we do all change with aging, as was mentioned. By the time we're 80, 85, maybe 40% reduction in memory and attention. And since I'm not 80, but I'm getting close, I know that I go into a room and meet people and I have to write down their names or I forget. So then the question is, how do you know if you're on that normal curve or not? The big thing I think is to watch yourself versus others the same age. Do I forget more than my wife does now? Am I getting lost more often than her? Am I having more word finding issues than her? Memory loss is certainly the most common presentation, maybe 75%. And it's not just where I left my keys. It's more like we had a conversation yesterday about what we're doing today and the person doesn't remember. And that'll just happen intermittently, but that's a big sign. And the second after memory would be language onset, visual spatial onset, as Lance said, coming to a corner, not knowing which way to go. And then attention executive is the fourth one. That means, like if a builder, I had a builder last week who couldn't assemble a project in his house from IKEA, that would be a big sign that something has changed in his ability to process information.
And how can early diagnosis really impact your chances of having more success with this disease or slowing it down?
Oh yeah, no, if you I hate to say this, but there's a certain curve we're used to seeing with folks with Alzheimer's cognitively. If we see them later on, maybe no effective drugs or 25%. If we see them very early, it slows things 60%. And there are even people who don't change for the first year or two. So it's very related to the stage that people present cognitively. And then, this is not necessarily something you guys want to know, but biomarker-wise, we can also tell how far advanced someone is. And so early biomarker and early cognitively are the ones that do the best.
Liz, you mentioned earlier, you used the word stigma. And I'm going to come to you with a follow-up on that in a second. But Anne-Marie, you deal with patients and families in the Alzheimer's Association. The goal is for people to call in. You guys want to help. But talk about some of the stigma that you believe is out there in the community when it comes to Alzheimer's and what you guys are doing to reduce that and help folks.
Well, stigma, it's kind of broad, because what happens is that you can have the feeling that something's wrong and that you caused it, okay? So there's that. There's a feeling that, so you must have done something that caused this, and that there's that. But then there's also just the embarrassment that families have, that their loved one is changing and maybe say something inappropriate, and so a lot of times actually that is one of the ways in which you might recognize that somebody's going through something, because they start to withdraw from their normal things in life because they don't want to tell someone that they have issues. Lance is unusual, in that he's ready to go and he's an advocate for this disease, and we're really happy about that. But there are a lot of families that they just don't want to tell anyone. And that can be detrimental, because then you don't go and seek the support and the treatment that's needed. So, even if you are worried that that something's going on, then check it out, because there are things that mimic dementia, and there are other things and so maybe there are these things that could actually be treated. But then if not, let's get to the help. But yes, there are many families that we hear from them when they're in crisis.
Do you want to mention anything about underserved communities maybe
Yeah,
even being more challenging?
Yes, and we do know, for instance, that African Americans, are twice as likely as white Americans to develop the disease, and 1.5 times more than the Hispanic community. But those communities many times have been culturally sensitized to keep things within the family. And so, one of the ways in which we combat that is working with the trusted organizations such as churches or, associations that they're comfortable with, going there and educating. You said that, you had this conversation yesterday and suddenly people were talking about it. So I think sometimes if we talk about it more, people invite, organizations invite us in to just give a presentation and talk about it. Then suddenly you find people saying, oh, wait, I think that's happening in my life. But you have to go in into the trusted organization. So, it can't just be that I say to you, hey, I want to come talk to you. A lot of times if you're in underserved communities, these communities also don't have the resources maybe to get diagnosed.
Right.
So we still have a lot of work there where we need to educate physicians and health organizations.
I know in the Latino community, culturally we sort of believe, I don't anymore obviously, but we believe it's a natural part of aging, and you just ignore it and ignore it. And again, I speak from my personal experience, regrets I have. We insulated my mother instead of opening up in a way to protect her dignity, and in retrospect perhaps that wasn't the best approach. I want to go back to the stigma that we were talking about with Anne-Marie. Where do you see that stigma? Have you experienced it, and how have you guys combated it?
Well, recently Lance had to be deposed for a court case that went back to his former career. And when I spoke with the attorney about it, I was making all the arrangements and doing everything, and they advised the Justice Department of Lance's condition so that everyone would be prepared. And when I spoke with the attorney, he said, well, we'd like to spend a half a day prepping Lance because we don't want him to be embarrassed because he doesn't remember something. And I said, absolutely not. He will not be prepping for anything. There's nothing to be ashamed of. He will not be embarrassed, as you can see.
Yeah.
He's not embarrassed by it. But I said, no, we're not going to do that. And that was such an example of people thinking that because of this happening, you should be embarrassed. And that's what I mean by the stigma.
Have you felt the stigma, Lance, with folks?
No, not really. I mean, but again, I don't. I mean, you can say whatever you want to me. I don't care.
Lance says that he's mellow, so he's mellow.
I can tell.
He's okay with that. He doesn't have a problem.
But I think that people do need to be aware and to notice things when they feel like they have to, and that's important.
How has it impacted your family unit, other than obviously the couple?
We have one son, and he lives in Austin, and his wonderful, wonderful wife. So we have a son and daughter-in-law, and our daughter-in-law is involved in the hospice industry. That's what she does, and so she's very aware and very knowledgeable. And so in the beginning, I could ask her many questions. What do you think about this? And we'd talk to her about it. And then our son, because he's an only child, we've always been very close, and he's been very involved in the whole process. He understands everything about it, knows the diagnosis, it's fatal, all of those things. So it's been very good. He's been very involved.
I'm not sure about that fatal
I
thing.
know, you
I'm
always
still
say that.
You're very much.
I told Lance, I said, if you are just the same as you are right now until you're 92, I'll be happy. He said, 92? I'm thinking 102. So he keeps pushing on that, saying it may not happen. But
well, I think Dr. Schultz, Lance is a testament to what medication is able to do now. Would you agree?
Absolutely. My clinic is very different than it was in the distant past, like more than a year ago. Everybody is changing so much more slowly. There was another gentleman with you last week. He said, Dr. Schultz, oh, come on in. Sit down. Tell me how I'm doing. And honestly, it occurred to me that I'd known him 3 years. I've never had a patient in the past who at 3 years knew who I was or why they were in clinic. It's a simple thing, but it shows how dramatically things have changed. It's not a cure, but thank God it's slowing things down enough that people are having more quality time with their loved ones and so forth.
I want to get to some of our viewer questions that we've had coming in. So one person has asked, what happens if Alzheimer's is left untreated and not diagnosed?
It turns out, even in America, 50% of people are never diagnosed.
That's amazing.
Up to this day, that's true. So we know what happens. It progresses on its own and has a, not good outcome.
Is there, we've used the word stigma, but what keeps people from coming into a clinic? Is it access? Is it, I've done advocacy work in terms of neurologists. It took almost a year for my mom to get into one of the top neurologists here in Houston. Yes.
It's a big issue. It's educating caregivers, educating patients, educating physicians. I talk all the time around town, and I do that. I think it's my public responsibility to get more people in. We had a neurology update on Saturday, and I talked to 100 people. They're all great neurologists, but they haven't heard anything about this. They have no idea what to do. So all of those steps are vital to getting more people in.
One other viewer question we've been getting, and I think it's a question on a lot of people's minds, especially if you have someone who's had the disease or passed away from the disease. What is the cause? Do we know what causes Alzheimer's?
No, well, somebody will get a Nobel Prize sometime soon when they figure out the cause. We know lots of the components and at the cellular level, lots of things that add together, but just don't know in one person, for example, exactly why they're here today.
Anne-Marie, maybe you could address this along with Dr. Schultz, but lifestyle changes is another viewer question that people have posed. What changes in terms of lifestyle and healthy living can help prevent Alzheimer's or manage symptoms as well?
Well, Dr. Schultz talked about the fact that the cardiovascular symptoms are also risk factors for Alzheimer's. We always say what affects the heart affects the brain. And so definitely the same sort of things that you do to protect your heart health, you can do to help you reduce your risk. We can only say reduce your risk because, again, we don't know the actual cause of the disease. We know that there are things that can cause it, and we know that there are things that can help you, or that put you at risk. So things like, taking a Mediterranean-style diet is one of the things that that's a proponent of healthy living. The Alzheimer's Association actually is doing a lifestyle study, and there have been a number of lifestyle studies that are done that show that exercise, being at a certain rate, helps to reduce your risk. Also, again, managing your cardiovascular risk factors. Being social. I think Lance is a testimony to this, but the more isolated you are, a lot of times that actually the disease seems to progress a little faster, maybe because you're not using your brain to talk to people and learn their names and things like that. So yeah, we can do certain things. Again, we don't know if this is going to stop us from having the disease, but it may give us more time. And I think that right now is the mantra we have. It's giving us more time. Quality of life is important. We don't want people to feel that they should just stay at home and do nothing. I think, Lance, you've been helping us also with our early stage programming, right? Haven't you been giving advice on what that can do to help people in the early stages?
They talked about that, yes. Sabrina had talked to us about that. So.
Yeah. Lance, have you done any of these things in terms of lifestyle changes? Have you guys implemented that into your daily routine in terms of trying to live a different lifestyle, a healthier lifestyle?
Yeah, I think so.
We've pretty much eaten healthy. Lance has been a type 1 diabetic since he was 13, so we pretty much eaten healthy the last several years. We try to be really good about that, and maybe a few things like, let's take Splenda out. Not to say anything bad about Splenda, but let's not have artificial sweeteners. Maybe we can do just some things like that, some little things, but yes.
Yeah. We have about 10 minutes left in our conversation. We have some more viewer questions to get to. So Dr. Schultz, Alzheimer's is a type of dementia, correct?
Yes.
There's different types of dementia. Can you walk us through that?
Yeah, the word dementia is like saying someone has a cough. It's a category. But now we've learned in the last 40 years that Alzheimer's is the most common neurodegenerative one, but there's also, we were talking earlier, Parkinson's, Lewy body disease, frontotemporal dementia, Huntington's disease. So when I see someone now, there's 100 things I think about that could be going on with them, and I try to differentiate them so we can get the best treatment for each one of them.
And you sort of addressed that in the next few questions. There's a difference between Alzheimer's and dementia, the fact that Alzheimer's is one of those types, and there's many more underneath. Correct?
Exactly. That's exactly right. And ultimately, it's defined by what we see in the brain. So we can say, yeah, this is definitely Alzheimer's, but each one of these dementias has a different process going on in the brain that we can ultimately diagnose, use to diagnose someone.
Lance and Liz, I'd like to go back to you. Again, from my own personal experience, I watched up close. My father was the primary caregiver for my mother. I helped as much as I could living here. But it takes a toll on a couple. It takes a toll on the family. I'm curious how you guys navigate that together. What have you learned through this experience that you guys are just beginning? And Lance is doing great, so you're doing a good job. But how have you guys coped and navigated this together?
I think we talk about that, about how we have a day today. Okay, so do we want to be sad or do we want to be happy? We really do start our day out that way, talking about that. And the thing that Lance said all along with the medication is that no matter what the results are from the medication, he has hope. And so every day he gets up and we have hope. I always say 93% of the time he's happy. But there's that other 7% where it does take its toll and it's emotional and can be difficult. But if we just look at it and say, this is another day that we have and we're okay. And so, like I said, it's like any diagnosis, but this one allows us to have that day.
I think you appreciate those days
Yes.
more if you allow yourself to get into that
I think
space.
that's it. You can say, we have this day, so let's create a new memory. Let's go to this Czech museum. We've never been there before. Let's go see it. Those kind of things that we do. Just kind of trying to make each day a good day.
The thing that's the most frustrating is when I know something, when I want to say something, and it just doesn't come out. I think in my world, the thing that is the most the thing that I deal with the most is not remembering something that I know I should remember, and I get a little frustrated. Generally, what I'll do is just say, just forget about it.
And then it'll come to you later, I'm sure.
Yeah.
They used to happen to my mom as well.
And then what do we say? We say, okay, let's take a deep breath. And then let's laugh a little. And we usually laugh about it when there's something that he can't remember because there's nothing else to do but laugh. And then we'll take it back. And
Laughter can be really powerful. We did just get another viewer question from folks watching at home, and that's, what are common complications of Alzheimer's disease? Dr.
Yeah,
Schultz?
that's a really good question. We kind of think of Alzheimer's as being a cognitive disorder, thinking, but everything we do as humans comes from our brain. So I would say 3/4 of my clients have either depression or anxiety. We treat that separately. A lot of my clients eventually might suffer from hallucinations or delusions, agitation, aggression, changes in behavior that, a nice guy like Lance might get short-tempered or something at some point. I hope not, but all of those so all of those are things that we think about as physicians and ask about so we can intervene and help people. It turns out of all of them, the memory loss is typically the least stressful, but the behavior changes, agitation, aggression, and all that, really stressful for the person and their loved ones.
I think memory loss is frustrating, as you mentioned, for the person with the disease, but I think it's also tremendously frustrating for the family members to see your loved one forget things, ultimately maybe forget you, which was, in our case, the biggest fear that I had. When you hear Alzheimer's, I don't know about you, Liz, but the first thing you go to is there's going to be a day where the person I love the most looks back at me and doesn't know who I am. I never experienced that except for one brief moment. My mom didn't get to the severe stages of the disease. I don't know if that's a blessing or a curse because she was taken too soon. But I recall in the hospital, and I share this story when I do advocacy work up in DC. We were at the hospital, and she wasn't doing well. She'd taken a turn for the worse, and they were doing a cognitive test, right, to see how things had declined in a couple days. And the neurologist comes in, points at me, and asks my mom, Mrs. Benito, who's that young man there? It had been a rough few days for me, so I'm already an emotional wreck, and I he asked her that question, and I see the pain in her eyes, right? Because she'd never forgotten me. She'd always known my name, you know. Before the hospital, no issues in terms of knowing who her people closest to her were, right? Doctor asked her that question, and I could see the struggle in her eyes. She could not find, for the first time in her life, she could not find my name. And it's just agonizing to see that she was working, and just realizing she couldn't find it. But she did find something else. And her answer, and I'll never forget it. I'm going to try not to lose it here, but I'll never forget it. She said, "I don't know his name. I can't tell you his name. But that's the person I love most in this world."
Oh my goodness.
And that's why I said in that piece, they don't forget love. It takes everything. It can take your dignity, it can take your memories, but it does not take that feeling of love. And I'll carry that with me for the rest of my life. We have about 4 minutes left, so I want to go around and just get closing thoughts on all of you in terms of our conversation today, resources, whatever you think can be most beneficial to folks watching at home who will navigate this disease or in the middle of navigating it now. We'll start with you, Dr. Schultz.
If I could say, caregiver stress is a huge issue, and we touched on it a little bit, but we're actually doing studies with people at Rice showing changes in the bodies of caregivers, inflammation changes, metabolic changes, etc. And for me, as a physician, I watch, the loved ones are so sweet and so kind, and they've been married so long, they don't ever want to give up that caregiving role. But one of my jobs then, when I see this changes in them, is to give them permission and say, "You've been an outstanding wife, but you know what, you need to have a little time alone for yourself and to spend with friends. And he will be okay with other folks for a few hours."
Sure. Anne-Marie, we have about 2 minutes left, so. your
Okay,
thoughts?
well, I'd like to say that we have a great presentation. Liz is a wonderful community educator, and she would love to do the empowered caregiver with you, because those things that we've talked about, behavior changes, communications, how to take care of yourselves, all there.
And Lance and Liz, you guys, I think, bring a tremendous amount to this conversation because you're in the middle of it. So what would be your advice to people out there dealing with this who may just start this journey?
I mean, it is what it is. I mean, it happens. You just have to. A good example, like Liz said, I was a type 1 diabetic at 13 years old. That, I mean, I had to learn to live with that as a young person, and that's just followed through my whole life.
I think the most important thing, and I tell so many people, is that you have to accept it and address it and start early. Seek help just as much as you can. Find out whatever you can. Don't wait, because waiting, as Dr. Schultz said, can put you in a different place. And don't wait. Start and look for help and see what you can find.
The only thing I would add, I guess, is to live every moment. You know,
Oh, yeah.
I don't think, in my experience, we did, because you're just so worried about the end. But live every moment, every good moment that you can to the fullest. I'd like to thank our special guests who joined us all this morning. If there's one thing I hope you took away from our conversation today, it's that you are definitely not alone. If you or a loved one are facing Alzheimer's, there is help available for you around the clock. And we mean around the clock, right, Anne-Marie?
Yep.
The Alzheimer's Association's 24/7 hotline is 800-272-3900. It's there on your screen for you. There's also a wealth of information and resources on their website, alz.org, including a wide array of support groups. Reach out, connect. Although it's difficult, reach out, do it. I promise you it will make such a huge difference in your lives and your loved ones' lives. Thank you so much for joining us for this conversation of hope, help, and healing for Alzheimer's Awareness Month on KHOU 11+. I'm Marcelino Benito.